On October 10th, 2025, the fragile peace between the world's two largest economies just collapsed. And what came next wasn't just another trade dispute, no. This was the start of a whole new kind of conflict, a high-stakes economic war fought not over soybeans and steel, but over the very building blocks of the 21st century, artificial intelligence and the rare minerals that make it all possible. So let's get into it and explore how this brand new battlefield took shape.
Okay, so how did we even get here? For a lot of early 2025, there was this feeling of calm, a shaky truce that seemed to be holding global markets together. Well, that illusion is completely gone. Washington and Beijing are on a collision course again. But this time the weapons are sharper, the strategy is way more complex, and the stakes, they're infinitely higher. Let's unpack how that temporary agreement fell apart so spectacularly.
Things escalated incredibly fast in 2025. It all kicked off early in the year with what some called a tariff blitz. The U.S. slapped on tariffs up to 145%, and of course, Beijing hit right back with duties of its own up to 125%. Then, in June, a little glimmer of hope, a 90-day tariff freeze. But the real problems, they were never solved. So by October 10th, the whole thing just disintegrated. President Trump threatened another massive tariff hike, and China immediately retaliated with new port fees on all U.S. ships. And just like that, the truce was dead.
And the market's reaction to all this, it was brutal. In a single day of trading, global markets lost an estimated $1.65 trillion. This wasn't some minor dip. This was a sign of pure panic. Investors around the world suddenly realized the world's two biggest economies were gearing up for a full-on economic war, and that shockwave hit immediately.
So, what makes this new conflict so different from the first trade war? It's really important to get this. This isn't just a sequel. They're calling it Trade War 2.0 for a reason. The entire battlefield has shifted. I mean, sure, the fundamental complaints might sound familiar, but the context is completely different now. It's all being defined by AI geopolitics and this fierce battle for who controls critical resources. When you look at how this conflict has evolved, it's pretty striking. Trade War 1.0, back in 2018, that was a much more, let's say, conventional fight, right? It was focused on tariffs, trade deficits, intellectual property. The targets were things like steel and soybeans. But Trade War 2.0, it's a whole different animal. The fight now is over AI chips and rare earth elements. This is a strategic war for the fundamental building blocks of our entire 21st century economy. It's not about who sells more stuff anymore. It's about who controls the arteries of future tech.
And that brings us to the real heart of this conflict, which you can really boil down to this idea of algorithms versus atoms. On one side, you have America's dominance in the digital world, the code, the software, the chip designs, and on the other, you have China's incredible power in the physical world, the manufacturing, the minerals, the sheer industrial capacity. Each side is now weaponizing its greatest strength.
So America's primary weapon is its whole ecosystem of innovation. The U.S. has immense power because it dominates the design of advanced AI chips from companies like NVIDIA and AMD. It controls the foundational AI models and cloud infrastructure from giants like OpenAI and Oracle. You combine that leadership with its influence over the global financial system, and suddenly Washington can roll out these powerful export controls, basically cutting off its rivals from the brains of modern technology. The U.S. is weaponizing the code.
Now, on the other side of this fight, you've got the atoms, the actual physical stuff that makes all that digital tech possible. We're talking specifically about rare earth elements, or REEs. This is a group of 17 metals that have these really unique magnetic and luminescent properties, and they are essential for pretty much all high-tech manufacturing. I mean, we're talking about the powerful magnets in EV motors and wind turbines, the components in our smartphones, and even the guidance systems in advanced missiles. They really are the new oil.
Now, this chart shows China's dominance in just one area, mining. It controls 70% of the global output. But its real leverage, the true choke point, is in processing, where it controls nearly 90% of the global supply. See, for decades, Western countries basically offshored this dirty, complex process, which effectively handed Beijing decisive leverage over the entire supply chain for everything from EVs to fighter jets. It's a massive strategic vulnerability that China is now starting to exploit. And China is now making this dominance an official weapon. In late 2025, Beijing announced this new system of export controls. First, they said licenses would be required for any product made anywhere that contains more than a tiny fraction of Chinese rare earth materials. Second, the rule directly targets the most sensitive industries in the world,
semiconductors, electric vehicles, and defense. And third, in a move that kind of mirrors Washington's own tactics, the policy reaches beyond its own borders. They have effectively created a choke point on the world's most critical supply chains. So what does this escalating conflict, this clash of algorithms and atoms, what does it actually mean for the global economy and, well, for all of us? The sources are really clear on this. When these two economic giants collide, the tremors are felt everywhere. This is not some contained dispute. It's a full-blown global economic shockwave.
This table here really summarizes the tit-for-tat moves, and it shows a multi-front economic war. It goes way beyond tariffs. Both sides are using export controls. The U.S. uses its entity list to blacklist specific Chinese tech firms, blocking them from buying American tech. And in response, China is using its rare earth restrictions and its own unreliable entity list to target foreign companies it doesn't like. Even shipping has become a front line, with both sides hitting each other with port fees. This isn't about one tool anymore, it's a full arsenal of economic weapons.
The market's immediate reaction was just panic. On that single day, October 10th, the Dow Jones Industrial Average plunged over 800 points. The tech-heavy Nasdaq fell 2.3%, its steepest drop in months. And this wasn't just a bunch of statistics. It was basically a global vote of no confidence from investors who saw the storm clouds gathering over the world's two largest economies. And this impact isn't just on Wall Street. It's being felt on Main Street. Economists are estimating this new round of tariffs could cost the average American household an extra $1,300 per year. And that's a direct result of higher prices on everything from electronics to clothes and groceries, because tariffs really just act as an indirect tax that gets passed all the way down to us, the consumers.
Now, if we zoom out and look at the whole economy, the potential damage is really significant. Projections are suggesting that if these policies continue full scale, it could shave 1 to 2% off U.S. GDP. And to put that in perspective, a hit of that size is often enough to slow down global growth in a big way, and could even be the thing that tips the U.S. economy into a recession in 2026.
Look, with any major disruption like this, you're going to have clear winners and losers. There's a potential boost for domestic manufacturing and this big push for Made in America policies. And critically, countries like Mexico, Vietnam, and India, they stand to gain as companies speed up their China Plus One supply chain strategies, a trend some are calling friendshoring. But that list of losers is pretty stark. U.S. tech giants like Apple and Tesla, who rely heavily on Chinese manufacturing, are facing huge disruptions. American farmers are once again collateral damage, and global retail is looking at a logistical nightmare.
So, where does all of this lead? We're honestly at a crossroads, with a deeply uncertain path forward. The analysis points to a few potential futures, and they range from a shaky, fragile piece to a complete fracture of the global economy as we know it.
Analysts have modeled three main scenarios for where we could be by 2026, and the odds are just alarmingly close. The most likely outcome, at 40%, is what they call a brinkmanship deal. Basically a last-minute agreement that gives us some temporary relief but leaves all the underlying mistrust. Right behind that, at 35%, is a deepening trade war, where talks just collapse and the global economy takes a really severe hit. And finally, at 25% is the most transformative scenario, a full strategic realignment.
This strategic realignment scenario, this leads to a world that's divided into two distinct technospheres. One would be the Western cloud, an ecosystem of allied nations dominated by American firms, all operating on shared democratic standards and anchored by the dollar. The other would be the Eastern grid, a system led by Chinese giants like Baidu and Huawei, built on state-linked infrastructure and increasingly using the digital yuan. This would completely fracture globalization, creating a battle over who sets the global standards for AI, for data privacy, and for the very future of the internet itself.
And that really brings us to this powerful quote. It just perfectly captures the stakes. This is not just about trade deficits anymore. People are describing it as a new Cold War. But instead of an arms race with tanks and missiles, it's a digital industrial duel. The weapons are algorithms and atoms, and the battlefield is the entire global economy.
So that leaves us with the ultimate question. Is what we're seeing just strategic brinkmanship, a high-stakes game of chicken before a final deal gets made? Or have we actually passed a point of no return, heading towards an irreversible breakdown of the global economic order? The coming months are going to be critical, and they'll reveal the answer, leaving all of us to basically just watch and see which future unfolds.